Have you ever stumbled into a moment that cracked open a door inside you? One you didn't even know was locked? A simple favor, a quiet afternoon, and suddenly something shifts. That's how it began for me. The kind of day that sneaks in unannounced, unremarkable at first glance, yet later leaves you wondering if something cosmic was at play. Some unseen hand gently rerouting your path. Sophia called that crisp autumn morning, her voice frayed at the edges with the kind of exhaustion only a nurse knows. I could hear the bustle of the hospital behind her, the sharp echo of her shoes on tile, the muted chaos of lives in motion. "Elena, please," she'd said, words tumbling out. "My sitter bailed again, and Alex can't be alone all day. I'm already late." Her plea hit the soft spot in me I'd never learned to armor. I had known Sophia since she was fresh out of college, full of idealism and overcommitment. Over the years, she'd become the daughter I never had, the one who still called for advice, but rarely had time to breathe. "Don't you worry," I said. "I'll be there in 20. I gathered my coat and keys, slipping on a scarf patterned with fading violets. Outside, the air held that peculiar stillness of early November, cold enough to nip, but bright enough to promise something new. The drive down Elm Street felt familiar, almost nostalgic. I'd been to that house countless times, back when Alex was small enough to leave fingerprints on every window, and scatter toys like breadcrumbs. I'd watched him grow up in snapshots, birthday cakes, scraped knees. The shy boy who once asked me if stars were the sky's freckles. The bungalow hadn't changed much. Ivy still claimed the brick walls like a secret. The porch sagged just slightly in the middle, and wind chimes sang their unsteady tune above the steps. But the air felt different now, quieter, older somehow. Sophia met me at the door, scrub-clad and breathless, her hair escaping its bun. She smelled of lavender sanitizer and coffee. "You're a saint," she sighed, hugging me tight. "I prefer goddess," I teased. She laughed, already backing down the walkway. "You'll find him upstairs, pretending he doesn't need anyone." And then she was gone, swallowed by the day. Inside, the silence was almost theatrical. The faint tick of a clock, the scent of chamomile tea still warm in the kitchen. Sunlight fractured through lace curtains. I shrugged off my coat, smoothing the wrinkles from my sweater, expecting the hours to drift uneventfully. A book, perhaps a quiet afternoon. Then I heard the soft rhythm of footsteps descending the stairs. Alex appeared, tall now, broader through the shoulders, his frame cutting an unfamiliar silhouette against the amber light. His hoodie was faded, sleeves pushed to his elbows, chestnut hair falling into his eyes. But it was the gaze that caught me, keen, deliberate, too steady for 17. "Elena," he greeted, mouth tugging into a crooked smile. "Right on time. Mom thought you'd bail. Said something about your garden needing you more." "Your mother exaggerates," I countered, perching on the arm of a chair. "Besides, who am I to resist a damsel in scrubs?" That earned a real laugh, low and rich, unexpected. It cracked the stiffness of the room, and for a moment, we simply existed in the warmth of shared humor. Our talk began light, his senior year, the looming college applications, how he was undecided in a way that was both rebellious and earnest. Then, as the sun inched across the floorboards, his tone shifted. "Maybe philosophy," he said, "or literature. People fascinate me. How we hide behind words. How adults say one thing while meaning another. It startled me. That's heavy for someone who still thinks pizza counts as a food group," I said. He grinned. "Pizza's profound, but I just noticed stuff. How grown-ups pretend confidence, fake ease. It's like everyone's reading from a script they didn't write." The words sank into me deeper than I expected. "We learn the act," I murmured, tracing the rim of my mug. "Life teaches you to wear armor. Alex tilted his head, studying me, not unkindly. What if you dropped it? Just for an hour. I tried to laugh it off, but something in his gaze stopped me. It wasn't youth looking up to age. It was one soul peering curiously at another, unafraid of what he might find. We talked until the light went honey gold, until shadows stretched long across the rug. At some point, the conversation drifted beyond small talk into confessions, fears, regrets. Little victories neither of us had spoken aloud in a while. The air between us grew alive with quiet recognition, the kind that hums beneath the surface when two people accidentally speak the same language. When I finally rose to leave, my limbs stiff but my chest strangely light, Alex walked me to the door. "Glad you came," he said simply, his voice carried no pretense, only sincerity. I met his eyes and felt something stir, faint, startling, like the whisper of a flame finding air. That night, I caught my reflection in the mirror and lingered longer than usual. There was color in my face I hadn't noticed in years. The day had not been ordinary at all. Something had shifted, quiet but irreversible. A week later, Sophia's name lit up my phone again. A string of rushed words punctuated by pleading emojis. Another shift, another sitter canceled, another small crisis in her endless carousel of caregiving. I didn't hesitate. My thumbs were already typing before I even registered the thought. Of course, I'll be there. The truth was, I hadn't stopped thinking about that last afternoon. It wasn't just the conversation, though that had replayed itself in fragments during sleepless hours. It was how I'd felt walking away, lighter, alert, as though some internal compass had twitched back to life. The thought of seeing Alex again carried a pulse of anticipation I couldn't quite name. Not romantic, not maternal, something quieter and older than both. The kind of curiosity that wakes when you find another mind tuned to your frequency. By the time I turned down Elm Street again, dusk was already thickening, the street lamps casting amber halos over wet pavement. The windows of Sophia's bungalow glowed like a hearth, the kind of warmth that pulls you in before you knock. I barely raised my hand to the door when it opened, and there he was, as though he'd been waiting. "Figured it'd be you," he said with that half grin, the one that didn't quite reach his eyes but carried a spark all the same. "I hope that's not disappointment I'm hearing," I teased, slipping past him into the familiar entryway. He shook his head. "Nah, just déjà vu." The scent that met me was cinnamon and cloves. On the coffee table, 2 mugs steamed, delicate curls of vapor twisting toward the ceiling. The playlist was different this time. Less background, more mood. Strings and soft percussion drifted through the space, brushing against the air like memory. "Hot cider?" I asked, unbuttoning my coat. He nodded. "You look like you might need it. Cold out there." I laughed, surprised by the simple thoughtfulness. "That's very old soul of you." "I get that a lot," he said, settling cross-legged on the couch. The evening unfolded with an ease I hadn't known I'd missed. No awkward small talk. No generational dance of politeness. Just questions, honest, piercing ones that left me peeling back layers I hadn't realized were still wrapped tight. "What fired you up when you were my age?" he asked suddenly, his tone more curiosity than challenge. I smiled into my mug, the steam warming my cheeks. Everything. I was chaos in motion. Wanted to run away, to write stories, to see the world twice over. I thought love would be an adventure, not an endurance test. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "So why didn't you run away?" The question landed without malice, just truth. I looked at him, at the youth in his posture and the age in his eyes, and felt something uncoil. Because life has a way of seducing you into staying still. You trade horizons for habits. Before you know it, the map folds itself away. He nodded, thoughtful. You make it sound like the fire went out. Maybe it did, I murmured, tracing the mug's rim. Or maybe I just stopped feeding it. Silence stretched, but it wasn't empty. He considered my words, brow furrowed just slightly, as though holding them up to the light. Then, softly, you don't strike me as someone who lets things die. More like someone who waits for the right spark. It was such a simple sentence, yet it landed like a hand pressed gently to the chest, grounding. Seeing we drifted from there into other things, the strange comfort of solitude, the ache of time passing faster each year, the beauty of being understood without explanation. I found myself speaking without self-editing, unguarded in a way that startled me. He listened not as youth to elder, but as equal to equal, his eyes reflecting back not pity, but presence. The hours slipped by unnoticed. Outside, night pressed its cool face to the window, rain threading faint patterns across the glass. Inside, the light was honeyed, the air fragrant with cider and candor. I hadn't realized how long it had been since I'd been truly listened to, not advised, not assessed, but heard. When I finally rose to leave, Alex followed me to the doorway again. It had become our quiet ritual. The house was hushed, save for the ticking clock and the faint hum of the playlist still looping. I like when you come by, he said simply, voice soft but certain. You don't talk at me. You talk with me. I smiled, feeling that warmth spread through my ribs. Well, that's because you make it easy. You listen like someone who's already lived a few lifetimes. He chuckled, rubbing the back of his neck, and the boy in him peeked through. Guess I'm just curious about people who still feel alive. The phrase lingered after I stepped into the night, the air sharp with the scent of rain. I walked to my car slowly, every sense awake, every thought burning quiet. Maybe that was what aliveness felt like, not youth or passion, but presence. The sense of being witnessed, and in turn, daring to see yourself again by the time I reached home. The muggy stillness of my apartment felt foreign, too silent after the warmth of his words. I poured myself a glass of water, stared out the window at the city lights blinking like distant embers, and realized I was smiling. I hadn't planned for any of this, yet somehow, I felt the faint thrum of possibility under my skin, like a pulse rediscovered. The following Saturday came with a sky so blue it looked deliberate, like the universe had brushed it clean for something new to unfold. I wasn't expecting to see Alex that day. Sophia hadn't called, and I had spent the morning pruning the garden, losing myself in the rhythm of soil and silence. But around noon, my phone buzzed with a short message. Hey, Mom's on double shift. Mind some company? I stared at it longer than I should have. The words were casual enough, but there was something beneath them, a quiet assumption, as though my presence had already become a kind of refuge. My fingers hovered over the screen before I typed, of course. Come by whenever. By the time he arrived, the light had softened into that lazy gold that made everything feel cinematic. He stood on the porch in jeans and a gray t-shirt, hair tousled, carrying a paper bag that smelled faintly of takeout and rain. Hope you like Thai, he said. I figured I'd bring lunch this time. I laughed, ushering him inside. You're learning the secret to good company. Feed your host. He grinned, setting the food on the table. And here I thought the secret was listening. That too, I said, meeting his gaze for a heartbeat longer than I meant to. We ate in easy quiet, the kind that only exists when two people no longer need to fill every space with sound. He told me about his classes, his teachers, the endless essays that seemed to demand opinions he hadn't yet decided on. I told him about the book I was reading, an old favorite I'd returned to after years, and how strange it felt to find new meaning in familiar pages. You ever think maybe books change because we do? He asked, spearing a piece of chicken thoughtfully. All the time, I said. The story stays the same, but we read it differently because we're not who we were the first time. He nodded slowly. Then maybe people are like that too. It was such a simple observation, but it sat between us like something sacred. After lunch, we drifted to the garden. The air was sweet with lavender, the breeze carrying the faint hum of distant traffic. He followed me to the flower beds, crouching beside me as I trimmed the edges. I used to hate quiet, he said, breaking the stillness. Now I think it's the only time anything real happens. I glanced at him, his eyes fixed on the soil, fingers brushing a fallen petal. There was a tenderness to the moment that felt unspoken yet alive. Quiet doesn't mean empty, I said. It's just space. Most people are afraid of space because it lets them hear themselves. He looked up, a slow smile forming. You're not most people. The words landed softer than a touch, but I felt them ripple through me all the same. We spent the next hour in that calm rhythm, conversation, laughter, silences that weren't awkward but full. At one point, I showed him the old oak bench at the far end of the yard, worn smooth by years of weather and memory. We sat there for a long while, the air between us light but charged. He turned to me suddenly. You ever regret not starting over? The question caught me off guard. What do you mean? Like picking a new life, moving somewhere no one knows you, being whoever you want. I considered it, watching the sun spill through the branches. I used to think about that all the time, I admitted. But now, I think starting over isn't about moving somewhere new. It's about deciding that you still can. He absorbed that, gazed distant. Then, softly, so you still can? I hesitated, the honesty rising before I could stop it. I don't know. Maybe that's what I'm figuring out. Something in his expression shifted. A flicker of understanding, quiet but certain. He leaned back, eyes half closed against the light. Then I hope you do. You deserve to. The words caught in my chest, small and unexpected. It wasn't pity. It was something cleaner. Recognition, maybe, or respect. The sun dipped lower, casting a golden outline around his hair. For a moment, everything felt suspended, the hum of the world muted. Time slowed to breath and heartbeat. I realized then how rare it was to feel so seen, so unguarded, without needing to explain or perform. When he finally left, the yard felt emptier but not lonely. I lingered by the bench, tracing the grain of the wood beneath my fingers. The air was cooling, the scent of earth rising stronger. Later that night, as I washed the dishes, I caught my reflection in the kitchen window. There was something different in my face, not youth, not exactly happiness, but a kind of reawakening, a softness that hadn't been there before. I didn't know where any of this was heading, or if it was even meant to lead somewhere. All I knew was that, for the first time in years, I felt like a version of myself I hadn't met in a long time, the one who still looked toward possibility and called it beautiful. The days that followed slipped by quietly, but with an undercurrent I couldn't quite name. I went through the motions of work, errands, phone calls, the hum of an ordinary life. Yet everything felt faintly illuminated, as though a thin film had been lifted from the world. The simplest things, a reflection in a shop window, the smell of coffee, the brush of sunlight through leaves, all seemed sharper, more vivid. It wasn't romance, not exactly. It was awareness. The kind that wakes when something dormant inside you starts to stretch and breathe again. Sophia's voice came through the phone one evening, tired but warm. You've been such a blessing, Elena. I don't know what I'd do without you. Her gratitude was genuine, but I heard something else in her tone. Relief, maybe. That someone had been there to fill the space she couldn't. He's different lately, she went on. Calmer, more focused. Whatever you're saying to him, keep saying it. I smiled faintly, though she couldn't see it. It's not me, Sophia. He's just growing up. But later that night, lying in bed, I replayed her words. Different lately. The truth was, we both were. That weekend, I found myself walking to the small art fair downtown. It was one of those local gatherings. White tents lined along the promenade, the air smelling of roasted almonds and paint. I hadn't planned to go, but something pulled me out of the house. Maybe I just wanted to be among color again. I was studying a collection of black and white photographs when I heard a voice behind me. You like those too. I turned. Alex stood there, hands in his pockets, a faint smile tugging at his lips. What are you doing here? I asked, surprised and oddly pleased. Mom mentioned you might come. Thought I'd check it out. Didn't think I'd find you staring at the same photo I was. He gestured toward an image of a woman standing alone on a bridge. Her hair caught mid-motion by the wind. The city stretched behind her in soft blur. There's something about her, he said quietly. Like she's halfway between staying and leaving. I nodded. She looks like she's remembering something she almost forgot. We stood there for a moment, shoulder to shoulder, both lost in the image. Then he said, "That's what I like about you, Elena. You see the same things I do, not what's obvious, but what's underneath." His voice was low, thoughtful, and I felt that strange stillness return, the one that seemed to hum between us, a current neither of us had meant to step into. We spent the afternoon wandering the stalls, tasting honey, touching fabrics, pretending to critique sculptures. But the air between us was charged with a softness I couldn't ignore, a tenderness made of recognition rather than desire. It was as though we'd found a secret frequency that only we could hear dot at one booth. An older painter spoke about how every piece was a conversation with time, how color could hold memory. Alex listened intently, his expression open, absorbing. I watched him from the corner of my eye, realizing how rare it was to meet someone who didn't fill silence just to escape it. As the sun began to sink, the fair lights blinked on one by one, stringing the air with warm gold. We walked toward the river, cups of hot cider in hand. The wind tugged at my hair, and I felt his gaze linger for a moment before he looked away. You ever feel like time's both too slow and too fast? He asked, like you're in between something, and you don't even know what. All the time, I said. It's the curse of awareness. He laughed softly. Then I guess we're both cursed. We stopped by the railing, the water catching the last of the light. He leaned against it, turning toward me. I'm glad I met you when I did, he said, his voice almost lost in the breeze. You make things make sense, even when they don't. I wanted to answer, to say something equally true, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I reached out and adjusted the collar of his jacket, a small, instinctive gesture that carried more meaning than I intended. His breath caught, just for a second. Neither of us moved. Then the moment passed. I stepped back, forcing a light tone. Come on, before your cider turns cold. He smiled, a little sad, a little knowing, and followed. That night, after he'd walked me to my car, I sat behind the wheel for a long time before starting the engine. The reflection in the windshield showed a woman I half recognized, softer around the eyes, somehow awake again. I wasn't sure what any of it meant, only that something unnamed had taken root, fragile and real. And no matter how I tried to reason it away, I knew life had quietly turned a page. The air had shifted by the time the next week came around, carrying that tender chill that hints at winter's edge. Even the light felt different, paler, slower, as though it too was hesitating before turning the season. I felt that hesitation in myself. The days had begun to carry a strange tension, not discomfort exactly, but an awareness that something delicate had begun to take shape between us. something neither of us had planned for nor named. I tried to resist it, to stay grounded in logic. Alex was still on the cusp of his life, while mine had already spun through decades of choices, regrets, and small awakenings. Yet, every time my phone buzzed with his name, every time I heard that familiar warmth in his voice, something inside me stirred. It wasn't foolishness. It was aliveness, a pulse I hadn't felt in years. That Sunday, Sophia called, exhausted as ever. "He's been restless again," she sighed. "Would you mind stopping by, just to check in?" I hesitated, the smallest of pauses that said too much. "Of course," I said finally. "I'll be there soon." The sky was gray when I arrived, clouds low and heavy like brushed silver. The house felt quieter than usual, the kind of stillness that hums. I found Alex in the living room, sketching absently in a notebook. His hair fell across his forehead, his focus absolute until he noticed me. Then, that half smile again, gentle, familiar. "Did Mom send you?" he asked, voice soft she might have, I said, setting my bag down. "But I don't mind." He gestured toward the couch. "Good. I was hoping you'd come anyway." We talked for a while about nothing and everything. His plans, his doubts, the restless ache of being almost grown but not quite free. He asked me about my youth, what it felt like to be on the brink of everything before the weight of it all settled in. I told him the truth, that it was beautiful, but terrifying, that I had once been braver, and that life, in its quiet way, teaches us to fear our own potential. He listened like he always did, not filling the spaces, just letting the words breathe. When I finished, he set the notebook aside. "You don't sound afraid now," he said. I met his gaze. "Maybe I'm just remembering how not to be." He smiled, and in that moment, the room felt charged, not with romance, but recognition. Two souls, generations apart, somehow meeting in the same quiet space of understanding. Outside, the rain began, a soft patter against the windows, steady and rhythmic. I moved to close them, but he stopped me gently. "Leave it," he said. "I like the sound." So we sat there, the rain threading its music through the silence. Time slipped, blurring edges, and for a while, we didn't speak. It was enough just to exist, two people suspended between what was and what might never be. When I finally rose to leave, he followed me to the doorway as always. The ritual had become an unspoken promise. I turned to say goodbye, and he looked at me with that same open sincerity that had undone me from the start. "You've changed me," he said quietly. "You made me see things differently. You made me pay attention." The words landed like a confession, tender but weightless. I swallowed the sudden ache in my throat. "You've done the same for me," I admitted. "More than you know." He reached for my hand, not to hold it, not to cross a line, but simply to press it once, gently, as though sealing a secret between us. His palm was warm, his touch brief but certain. Then I stepped back, letting the cool air fill the space. "Take care of yourself, Alex," I said softly. "I will," he replied. "You too, Elena." Outside, the rain had deepened, slicking the streets in a shimmer of reflected light. I walked to my car slowly, each step heavy with the weight of something both complete and unfinished. When I looked back once, he was still there in the doorway, a silhouette framed by the dim glow of the house behind him. Driving home, the city lights blurred through the rain on my windshield, and I let them. The ache I felt wasn't sadness, it was gratitude for the reminder that connection, however brief, can wake parts of you thought were long gone. When I reached home, I didn't turn on the lights right away. I stood by the window, listening to the rain, the echo of his words still lingering. Life hadn't offered me some grand, cinematic ending, only this quiet clarity, that it's never too late to be moved. to rediscover something that feels like wonder, to feel the fragile grace of being seen, and in that gentle knowing, I realized not every story needs forever. Some moments, brief and unspoken, are already enough.